Good evening, boys and girls. It's almost Halloween, which means it's that time of year. Monster season. It's the time of year for scary movies. I'm not the hugest modern horror movie fan, but I am a fan of the classics. I've always loved sitting here watching Frankenstein, Dracula, The Invisible Man. All of those classic Universal monster movies were all filmed at Universal Studios, and I've always been sad that there's really nothing left at Universal Studios to see, that you can't visit the filming locations from these movies. Now, Frankenstein especially, I've always been a big fan of. Dracula, too. The Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I'm rewatching them all this year, and I took it up a notch by buying the big box set that has all the sequels from the various monster movies as well. And it was only this year, while watching all of these, that it suddenly dawned on me I've been missing one of the big Universal monsters. All these years that I've been watching and rewatching the classics, and I realized just a few weeks ago that I've never seen The Mummy, the original Mummy. The one starring Boris Karloff, you know, the same guy that was Frankenstein's monster. So far this Halloween season, I've watched it about 5 times. I've seriously fallen in love with this mummy. It's a tragic tale of eternal love and eternal death. Boris Karloff is fantastic in it. And best of all, about the second or third time I watched this movie, I realized not only are some of these scenes definitely not filmed on the Universal Backlot, but I actually recognize some of these backgrounds, which means we, like the characters in the movie, can mount an expedition to find the mummy. Now, of course, the movie The Mummy is set in Egypt, and there are a few stock shots, some footage of Egypt in the movie itself at the very beginning. But of course, why take a whole movie production to Egypt when you can film right here in the deserts of California? Just look around at all of this desert scenery. And as exotic and beautiful and remote as this all looks, in reality, we are actually standing within an easy 3-hour drive of Los Angeles. This is a Red Rock Canyon State Park, and in the movie The Mummy, it doubled for Egypt. Now, I've never actually been to Egypt personally, but I gotta say, this is pretty convincing. After all, this rock right here looks sort of like a camel, doesn't it? Look at this, it's absolutely breathtaking, and apparently, Karl Freund, the director of The Mummy, agreed. He was famously responsible for the cinematography of Dracula, and was part of developing the 3-camera sitcom with I Love Lucy much later. But here, out in the California desert, it was Karl Freund's turn to direct. And so he brought film stars David Manners and Boris Karloff, the mummy himself, out here to Red Rock Canyon right along this, the Hagen Canyon Loop Trail. It's a little windy today, but luckily it's not too hot. So this is a pretty easy hike, only about a mile from the main road, and we're about to see our first spot from The Mummy. Now, the movie The Mummy opens up with the credits, and then we see the 1921 British Museum Field Expedition. The 1921 gang has just dug up the mysterious mummy of Imhotep and accidentally brought him to life. Of course, the only one who sees that goes crazy, so they don't know that Imhotep has come back to life. We next flash forward to 1932, and that's when we get our first look of Red Rock Canyon right here. This is the exact spot from up here across this wash where we first see the 1932 British Expedition headquarters. Just think of it. Right here is where they set up the sets from The Mummy. And this is where we get our first glimpse of Frank in the movie, our hero, going across into the expedition hut. He's out here working on Egyptian stuff. And I am totally tripping out that we are actually standing where they filmed that movie. I mean, right now, I am standing where the character of Frank would have been entering into the field expedition hut. And right before he did, he turned around and looked across the valley where he sees a mysterious stranger approaching on the back of a donkey. And we don't know it yet, but we've just caught our first glimpse of the mysterious Ardath Bey, played by Boris Karloff. Ardath Bey is sort of the secret identity of the mummy when he's come back to life. And it's crazy because in the movie I'm looking at the donkey up here and I just take it for granted that there's a nice wide area. But if you look at how narrow it really is on top of this rise, boy, that donkey was really risking his neck and Boris Karloff. Now it's crazy because in the movie it looks like Fred is looking really far away from that headquarters to see Ardath Bey coming. But in reality, the headquarters building was set up pretty much right on the ground in front of me, and that little hill with Boris Karloff, Karloff is just right there. That's a little movie trickery for you. He's looking like this when really Boris Karloff is just right there. Getting a chance to come and see where movies were actually shot is always a trip because of the way they sort of distort space. Ooh, look at this rock. Looks like a mushroom. Don't trip on it, right guys? Don't trip. Okay. Take a look at that shot again. Boris Karloff coming down the hill on the donkey in 1932, and then the view of the same spot today. It's amazing how similar the two shots look. Not much has really changed in this area. What a trip. Two locations from the Mummy right next to each other. The Ardath Bey Hill and the Field Expedition Headquarters right here. I was actually just tripping out because there's a little wooden stake buried most of the way in the ground. You don't think that could be left over from the Mummy in 1932, do ya? Did you know the Mummy? Did ya? Anyway, before I got distracted, I was gonna say, you see how these two locations are really right back to back? Well, the rest of the Mummy locations out here are also similarly clumped together, because from this spot right here, we just have to take the trail around the corner and we'll see even more. Okay, less than 100 yards away from where we just were is sort of the main cluster of Mummy locations. Right behind me is the Mummy's tomb. See that low spot in the cliffs right there? That is what we're looking for. Right here is where the outdoor part of the tomb set was set up in the movie The Mummy. Now, if you haven't seen the 1932 classic movie The Mummy, you should probably take a look, because from this point on, there are going to be some spoilers ahead. Basically, the whole plot of the movie is that Ardath Bey, aka the Mummy Imhotep, has come back looking for the tomb of his lost love, Princess Aksunamun. So he's leading the archaeologists to the tomb so that they'll dig up his lost love. But we don't see that tomb until a little later on in the movie. Right now, we're just using that as a landmark so that we can turn right and go up this crazy hill to get to our next location on top of that cliff. So just remember, if you're gonna head out here and see this for yourself, just head up this way. It's definitely not quite as clear on camera, but this is actually a pretty steep hill, so be careful if you climb up here. It's a little cliffy. All right, our next shot from the Mummy is right up here on top of these cliffs. And this is not solid rock by any stretch of the imagination, guys. It's a little slippery, a little cliffy, but this is one of the most classic shots from the Mummy. The scientists are skeptical, but since Ardath Bey, the Mummy, told them that the tomb of the princess is not even 100 yards from where they were, they come out onto these the scary cliffs for him to point out the location of the princess's tomb. And this is the spot. This right here is the cliff edge where Boris Karloff is standing in one of the most classic scenes from the Mummy, right up there on the edge. I'm not a huge fan of cliffs or heights, or more specifically falling from them, but when in Egypt, do as the Mummy did. Oh gosh. Okay, here we go, onto the edge of the cliff with the wind blowing. We're about to recreate the scene. Here we are, high above the world, showing the location. Okay, that's close enough, that's close enough. Woo, I did it! Oh, you got to be kidding me. I got closer to the edge than Boris did? He wasn't even all the way out on the edge. He was standing right here. Okay. Take two. Here we are, atop the cliff, gesturing out over the tomb of our lost love. And that's it. I did it! Braver than Boris. For the record, guys, I do not recommend doing that. Do not try this at home. I'm a professional, sorta. Just realized I don't have any life insurance. Now we're kind of working against the setting sun, but you see those cliffs in the background? When they do the close-ups of Boris Karloff's face, you can actually see that very distinctive ridgeline back there. Oh, those three rock formations look just like they did back in the 30s. That was the better part of a century ago. All right, next we see the camera follow Frank, and as you can see, the shape of this part of the hill hasn't changed much either. Where the two archaeologists were conferring looks pretty much the same as it did. Pretty easy to line up. It is really tripping me out to think that we are standing where Karloff the Uncanny himself was standing, right up on top of the cliff. Okay, so then the archaeologists are deciding, kind of having a little debate right in this area here, and one of them says, why not? We can find out in 2 days if there's anything there, to which Boris Karloff says, in 1 day, Professor. And by the way, if you watch that scene and that deep Boris Karloff mummy voice sounds familiar to you, that's the voice of the narrator from You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. Anyway, after saying, in 1 day, Professor, we get another shot of them standing on the cliff, and then the camera pans down the rock formation across what would become the dig site. It's crazy because in that pan down, everything looks pretty much the same today as it did 80 plus years ago. The camera pans down here, then there's a little fade, and all of a sudden we see this whole area full of workmen handing baskets of rubble to each other up this steep hill. It's just hard for me to imagine putting dozens of people here handing all that stuff to each other, risking their lives for that one short shot. But it was the 1930s, so I guess the safety standards were a little bit different. Again, this is another do not try this at home, folks. This is very sketchy. But as the workmen are digging down here, our next shot is right below that cliff where Boris Karloff was standing earlier. All of a sudden, one of the foremen for all the workmen and the diggers here, who is standing right on this very treacherous slope, turns around and yells up to the British archaeologists on top of the hill saying, we found something, we found something! And it's difficult to get close to because honestly, this all feels like it's just gonna slide out from underneath me. But that shot was right here on this slope because you see this eroded rock formation in front of us. That was actually right behind his head in the shot where he's turning around and yelling to the British guys. But if you know where to look, it still looks pretty recognizable. All right, like the dirt in the baskets, let me get back up the hill here. All right, now as those guys are all digging here and we see them handing up baskets of dirt to each other, they're singing that song. The camera slowly pans up to the top of the hill where we see the two British archaeologists have set themselves up a nice little camp. They've got a nice little shade umbrella. They got a barrel full of water. Although actually, considering that they were British, it could have been a barrel full of tea. And if we use the crest of that ridge in the background as a guide, we can kind of line up the top of the hill here and get pretty much the exact same view of where the British guys were sitting at the top of the hill. Wow, it is amazing the way that that lines up. You can almost still picture those British archaeologists just sitting up there waiting for good or bad news, chilling with their barrel full of tea. Luckily though, when that guy starts yelling down there that they found something, the British have got their good news, and then there's a shot of them getting up out of their camp chair under their shade umbrella, which was filmed up here on top of this hill. And then we get a wider shot of the British guys running down this slope towards the workmen. Now, I've been out here for a while, and let me tell you, this slope where they would have ran down is steep. Steepness is something that's really hard to catch on camera. But I want to tell you, see this cliff? This is pretty much straight vertical. So I know it's hard to tell, but if you use that as a guide, you can kind of see just how steep this hill goes. I am 99% sure that if I started kind of running down this hill like that, I would not be able to stop. I'd be running all the way to the bottom to my grave. But anyway, we see the British archaeologists running down this hill here past the workmen, stopping right about here where they peer down into the hole to see what's been uncovered. And that was actually filmed just a little ways on the other side of this cliff, back where I pointed out earlier, that tomb site. So basically they're running halfway down the hill, pretending to look in a hole here, but the actual hole is located back here at the tomb location. And our next shot is the camera down here looking up this way, up at the British archaeologists. This is definitely formed by water flowing down the hill and kind of coming over the edge here. So there's been plenty of erosion, but right here is the view the British archaeologists would have had peering down at the step the workmen uncovered, the step leading to the tomb. They were surprised. Ardath Bey was right. This is crazy. I mean, this is pretty much the same exact shot and the same exact spot from the mummy. Wow, imagine that. There's a tomb. There's a step down here. We found a step. Double back sheesh. Double back sheesh. That's what they start yelling, you know, double money, work faster. And then there's another long shot of the workers here on the hillside working much faster as they uncover the tomb of the princess Ankh-Sunamun. Now, the tomb itself, the one that they go inside, was filmed on a Hollywood soundstage. In fact, actually, most of the rest of the movie was filmed at Universal Studios. You know, the one where there's a theme park now. But luckily, we still have more to see out here in Red Rock Canyon because they cut to this area again in a flashback scene later on in the movie. Now, for those of you who haven't seen The Mummy, you're unlikely to watch The Mummy. I'll try to fill you in really quick. And this is where I would say spoiler alert, but the movie came out in 1932. You've had time. To make a long story short, they basically find the princess's mummy in the tomb, take it back to the museum in Cairo where Ardath Bey finally can resurrect his lover. Only he finds out her soul isn't trapped in her body like his was. She has been reincarnated as the beautiful Helen Grosvenor, played by Zita Johann. The archaeologist from the beginning, Fred, he's in love with Helen, and there's a whole back and forth there, but Ardath Bey needs this lady Helen to fall back in love with him because she's the soul of Ankh-Sunamun. So basically, he sort of lures her back to his lair in Cairo and shows her a flashback scene of what happened to him in his magic pool. No, I'm not making this up. Come on, it was the 30s. And it's in those scenes from the magic pool we finally see her tomb, which is just a quick hop down there. But I think I'll go around. All right, so he's showing her a flashback of right after she died. And we cut to a scene where we see the princess's funeral leading right up to this tomb. Now, in the movie, the funeral procession is heading right down that little bit of red rock, right towards the fake tomb they set up, right in that very same crack the archaeologists are peeking over in 1932. There's a great shot where we see the camera pan down from the mountains on to the princess's funeral procession. It's pretty cool because it really doesn't look like much has changed since 1932, other than the fact that we're obviously shooting in color. Oh yeah, if we shoot it in black and white, looks a little more accurate. Then we see the camera zoom in sort of against that cliff wall there on the oxen and the Egyptians coming down the hill. It's pretty crazy how absolutely the same it looks. I mean, possibly a tiny little bit of erosion, but it's the exact same spot. And then, of course, it pans down on the tomb itself. It's funny because they only show the outside wall of the tomb set here for just a few frames. You can actually just make out this sort of rock formation in the side of the frame with the tomb. Although, sadly, you can clearly see that part of it has fallen down off the cliff due to erosion, because as much as this looks like it's solid rock, it's actually like sort of really compressed dirt. I could scrape away at this if I wanted to, but of course that would invoke the curse of the mummy. Alright, so basically Imhotep sees Ankh-Sunamun, his true eternal love, being buried here, and he comes back, sneaks back later, having stolen the sacred scroll to resurrect her from the dead. But this is considered an evil thing, a blasphemy, so he is cursed and buried alive out here in the desert. The scene was shot at night, so it's very, very difficult to tell, but if you look closely at the screenshot from the movie, it really looks like the Egyptians were standing right about here and buried Imhotep somewhere down in this dirt here. It's somewhere right in this general area, that's for sure. And of course, he waits there until 1921 when he himself is resurrected by British archaeologists, comes back as the mummy, trying to seduce Helen, kill her, and resurrect her as Ankh-Sunamun again so they can both be dead and live forever. It's a beautiful, tragic, deadly love story. And much like my first marriage, it did not work out. Helen realizes, I'm alive, I'm young, I want to live even in this strange modern place. She calls out to her Egyptian gods who save her from the mummy. And that's basically the end of the story and the end of the actual filming locations that you can visit. Now, in case you were wondering, I have been looking all around here in the dirt and at the rock face all day long, and sadly there's no physical evidence of them filming the movie out here more than 80 years ago. Geez, can you believe those movies are going to turn 100 pretty soon? That's crazy. Like I told you, I've been on a super huge kick with the old Universal horror monster movies, and this has been amazing to come here inside the tomb of the mummy from the original 1932 Boris Karloff movie. It doesn't get much more old school than this. This is awesome. Now, I know it's not really allowed, and I may be risking the mummy's curse, but maybe I'll just take a souvenir just this one time. Oh! It's the mummy! It's the mummy! Run for your life! No! Run for it! Run for it!
I just had surgery.
George! So you're my mummy!
You really couldn't tell it was me?
Honestly, I probably should have, but I didn't. How long have you been out here?
3,000 years.
All right, guys. Well, the sun is going down out here at Red Rock Canyon. We've paid a visit to our mummy on Mummy's Day, right? How good do you feel in those bandages?
I feel secure.
Very breathable. And we've walked in the footsteps of not only Imhotep, but Boris Karloff himself. All right, make sure you check down below in the description for lots of links, other videos, t-shirts, hats, all kinds of cool stuff. And what do you say you and I walk like a couple of Egyptians back to the car, huh? All right, see you guys later in Random Land. Bye-bye. Bye, Mummy. Actually, not that far. I don't even know what I was gonna say. I just got so excited there was no wind for 1 second that I thought I'd jump in front of the camera. Sometimes even I don't know what I'm doing. Didn't know there was a big hole there. Almost ate it on camera. Hi, Mom! Bye, Mom! Oh, not much of a talker, eh?
He knows if he speaks, the stakes are high.
Oh, Georgie! George is nervous about the cliffs.
My legs are like burning.
Okay, that's better. Don't fall. Don't touch the sides. This is dangerous work here. No one ever understands how many cliffs I have to stand on. Don't worry, dude. We're not gonna die. Not today. Not today.
Give me a second.
You're okay.
I'm good.
You're good.
Okay.
Ooh. Sheesh. Yeah, probably. Okay. That's good. Now in addition, and of course he himself waits there until he's resurrected, contains her soul. She's been reincarnated. Dang it! As they uncover. What?
I saw this like behind me at the corner of my eye, and I thought it was a snake.
George, this is a family show. You're fine. George is one of the toughest guys I know, but take the boy out of the desert and put him in the desert, and then something happens. Oh yeah, one more thing. I always wondered in that shot where they're panning down the funeral procession going to the tomb, how come in the second shot it just pauses, no one's moving, and someone's literally standing there like a hieroglyphic? It's the craziest thing ever. What are they doing? Quiet on the set, please. Can we have everyone just stand like a hieroglyphic? Just hold perfectly still. That'll be great. And that's a wrap. So rewrap it. So it'll be a wrap. It's not an unwrap, George. It's not what you say when you're done. Okay, I'm sorry. Just kidding. That's an unwrap. Yo, dog, that's a wrap. My mummy's over here and he don't look like crap because he's got a lot of bandages. Say what? I can't do that. No talent. No natural sense of rhythm. I love how I wrapped you all up and safety pin bandages to you. And I'm just letting you do all the work, unbandaging it.
Yeah, I can't get this off.
You a hockey fan, George?
Can you like seriously put the camera down and help me get out of this?
No! I'm trying to have a conversation. This is bro time. What's your favorite band?
New Found Glory.
What do you think inspires you the most about New Found Glory? Is it the glory that they've just found? It's definitely not the old glory. It's the new glory. I get that part. You ever heard that song, George? Bela Lugosi's dead. You like that song? Bela Lugosi's dead. It's not a Bela Lugosi movie, but there are a lot of people from Dracula.
I've heard of Bela Karolyi.
Well, Dracula's director directed The Mummy. He was the cinematographer and he directed The Mummy. And then you had a lot of people who were actors in Dracula. Van Helsing was in The Mummy. Come on, man. I tried to make George watch the movie before we did this. Oh, you got one right there.
I did watch about a half hour.
Why didn't you finish it?
I just couldn't get into it, man.
Your mummy didn't approve? Careful, George. It's a safety pin.
I got it.
You have to use safety.
I got it.
Okay, you got it?
Yeah.
All right, be careful now. Make sure you clean all this up. Don't leave your toilet paper out here, George. You okay?
Okay.
How about a mummy made of used toilet paper?
Okay, I'm actually gonna help you now. And now it's a wrap. Wrap it up!